I never thought the worst humiliation of my life would come wrapped in roses, crystal chandeliers, and a microphone in my sister's hand. The words ring in my mind, even before she's spoken them. As I stand frozen under the dazzling lights of the Fairmont Hotel ballroom in San Francisco, all around me, laughter floats like bubbles in champagne glasses. White roses spill over tall glass vases. The violins of a live quartet weave soft melodies through the hush of 1,000 whispered conversations. The air smells like expensive perfume, wedding cake, and polished silver. And me, I'm standing at the edge of this glimmering world, wrapped in a navy satin dress I rented for a single night. The seam pulling slightly at my hip. My hair's pinned up as best I could manage alone, hands trembling while I twisted each bobby pin into place in the tiny bathroom of our apartment. Ethan, my 8-year-old son, tugs at my hand. He's wearing a little suit that cost me 2 paychecks. His eyes are wide as saucers, darting from the chandeliers sparkling overhead to the crowd moving in silken waves. "Mom, is this a castle?" he whispers, voice full of wonder. I swallow the knot in my throat and force a smile. "Sort of, baby, just with more people staring." He beams, his small chest puffing out like he's part of something grand. I want to see this place through his eyes, magical, shimmering, beautiful. Instead, I see a battlefield. At the far end of the ballroom, Sabrina, my little sister, floats through clusters of guests, her laughter sweet as sugar. She's the picture of perfection, sleek blonde hair in soft waves, her white gown glittering under the lights like fresh snow. Her smile seems permanent, sculpted onto her face as she leans in to accept kisses on both cheeks, arms gracefully folded around the next person who tells her how radiant she looks. Everyone loves Sabrina. They always have. She's the social media darling, the influencer with nearly 1 million followers who devour every curated snapshot of her perfect life. And me? I'm Julia Carson, 35, single mom, 2 jobs. The older sister people forget exists unless they want to tell a cautionary tale. I clutch my small purse tighter against my side as I edge through the crowd, trying not to bump into glittering gowns and tailored tuxedos. Conversations flicker around me, snippets like sharp glass. Sabrina deserves all this. I heard her sister's coming. Can you imagine? It's so sad, really, raising a kid alone. I keep walking, pressing a polite smile to my lips, each word slicing deeper than the next. My mother, Deborah, stands regally near the head table, a vision in an emerald satin dress. Her posture is perfect, spine straight as the stem of a wine glass. Her lips curve as she laughs with Sabrina's fiancé's family. But when her gaze drifts my way, her eyes skim over me like I'm one of the waitstaff carrying hors d'oeuvres. Ethan gives my hand another tug. "Mom, why's everyone wearing sparkles?" My throat tightens again. "Because they want to shine, honey." He looks up at the ceiling, eyes shining themselves. "It's pretty," I smile for him, only for him. I glance at my place card, tucked away on table 23, practically hiding beside the doors to the restrooms. A low laugh bubbles in my chest. Of course, even here, I'm background noise. The violins crescendo. Sabrina steps onto the stage, one delicate hand reaching for the microphone. A hush ripples through the ballroom like a cold breeze. My stomach flips. My skin goes hot. And all I can think, as my heart thunders against my ribs, is that I should have known. Nothing in this room sparkles for me. When people look at Sabrina Carson, they see the American dream bottled up in a blonde, dazzling smile. They see a girl who always lands on her feet. A woman whose Instagram feed looks like the highlight reel of a fairy tale. But when people look at me, if they bother looking at all, they see the reminder that sometimes fairy tales don't come true. I'm Julia, Julia Carson, 35, single mother, a barista by sunrise, hotel front desk clerk by sunset, and for as long as I can remember, I've lived in the shadow of my little sister's perfect glow. Growing up in our house in Palo Alto was like living on stage. The curtains always drawn back. The audience always watching. My mother, Deborah, ran the show. And believe me, she demanded perfection from her cast. Deborah Carson is the kind of woman who believes family is a brand. Appearances matter more than love, more than comfort, more than truth. Our father left when I was 10. One day his bags were gone, the garage empty, the smell of his cologne fading from the hall closet. My mother never spoke his name again. She just turned sharper, colder. And Sabrina? Sabrina was the son, 5 years younger than me. Blonde hair like spun gold, blue eyes so clear they practically glowed under California sunlight. The first time she entered a room as a toddler, people gasped at how beautiful she was. Deborah poured everything into her. Ballet classes, modeling shoots, private singing lessons. Sabrina's school photos went on the fridge. Mine, not so much. I used to think if I tried harder, I could catch up. I was a good student, top of my class. I got accepted to Stanford with a partial scholarship. My dream was to study literature, maybe become a writer, but dreams have a way of shattering quietly. I met Chris Madden during my senior year of high school. He was funny, charming, older by a few years. He drove a dark blue Mustang and made me feel like the only girl in the world. By 25, I was in love, pregnant, and certain I'd finally carved my own path. Chris promised he'd be there, promised he'd build a family with me, promised a house, a future, forever. By month 5, he was gone. No note, no call, no Mustang in the driveway, just silence. Deborah never screamed. She never cried. She simply stared at me across the kitchen table and said, "Well, Julia, you always were the difficult one." No one in my family asked how I'd pay the hospital bills. No one offered to help decorate the nursery. Sabrina didn't call. Instead, photos of her in sequined dresses, with cocktail glasses and new brand deals, flooded my social feeds. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of San Francisco. I gave up Stanford, my books, my plans. I started working days at Bean Scene Coffee and nights at the reception desk of the Seaside Inn. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept the lights on. Some nights, after my double shifts, I'd come home and find Ethan asleep on the sofa, a coloring book still clutched in his small hand. I'd kneel beside him, brush his hair off his forehead, and whisper, "You're the best thing I ever did." Because he is Ethan Carson, my whole universe. Brown hair, brown eyes, the tiniest cleft in his chin, my chin. He has this little grin that makes strangers smile back, even when they're having the worst day. He's the reason I get up, the reason I keep going, even when my body wants to collapse. But in my mother's eyes, my single motherhood was a stain, a flaw in the Carson family brand. Deborah believes Sabrina's wedding is a second chance to show the world that the Carson name still shines bright. That's why, when Sabrina's wedding invitation arrived, I almost threw it away. It came in an ivory envelope with gold foil letters. Inside, the script scrolled across heavy cardstock, all swirls and elegance. Sabrina Carson and Derek Collins request the honor of your presence. Only it didn't say Julia. It said Juliana. I stared at that name for a long time. Part of me wanted to stay away, to avoid the whispering, the looks, the judgments, but another part, the part that still hoped my family might one day see me. Not just my mistakes, thought maybe showing up was the right thing. Maybe, for Ethan's sake, I could endure one night. Maybe Sabrina would extend a real olive branch. Maybe my mother would look at me and finally see her daughter, not just the family's cautionary tale. So I RSVP'd yes, and I told Ethan we'd be going to a wedding in a real-life palace. Because sometimes we have to walk into the places that once broke us, if only to prove to ourselves we can survive them. On the morning of Sabrina's wedding, San Francisco woke up bathed in a pale, golden light. The sky hung cloudless over the bay, like the whole city had decided to dress up for my sister's big day. In our small kitchen, Ethan sat at the table, swinging his feet, his little black suit laid out neatly beside him. He stared at it like it was some sacred artifact. "Mom, do you think Aunt Sabrina will dance with me?" I paused, my hands hovering over the toaster. His question hit me somewhere deep, where the hope I kept buried tried to surface. "Maybe, baby. She might be busy, but maybe," he grinned, flashing the gap where he'd just lost a front tooth. "I'm gonna ask her anyway." I wanted to tell him that sometimes people you love don't always love you back the way you hope. But I couldn't. Not on a day he deserved magic. In the cramped bathroom, I stood in front of the mirror, a cloud of hairspray hanging around me. I pinned my hair up again and again until it looked halfway decent. My dress was navy satin, rented from an app that promised red carpet glamour on a budget. It shimmered under the cheap bulb overhead, but I kept imagining how it might look under the ballroom lights. When we finally left the apartment, Ethan held my hand so tightly my knuckles turned white. Outside, the cable cars rattled past, tourists snapped photos, and I tried to ignore the sinking feeling in my chest. At the Fairmont, doormen in red jackets held open the towering brass doors. Chandeliers blazed above a lobby filled with orchids and the soft strains of piano music. Ethan spun in a circle, eyes wide. "Mom, is this really where princesses get married?" I swallowed the burn rising in my throat. "Yeah, honey, I guess it is." A woman in a headset whisked us upstairs to the ballroom. White and gold arches framed the enormous space, where waiters moved like swans carrying silver trays of champagne. I could feel eyes glancing at me as I entered, subtle flicks up and down, checking the dress, the shoes, measuring how well I'd hidden the fact that I didn't belong. Ethan squeezed my fingers. "Everything smells like flowers and soap." I laughed despite myself. Tables were covered in ivory linens, topped with crystal candelabras flickering like tiny stars. I glanced down at the small card in my hand. Table 23. Of course, tucked away beside the restrooms, practically hidden by a giant pillar. I tried to convince myself it didn't matter. At the head of the ballroom, Sabrina glided through clusters of guests. Cameras flashed every few seconds as people took photos for Instagram stories. She wore a new dress now sleek, satin, white as the inside of a seashell, hugging her slender frame. The lights caught every shimmer, every perfect curve. She turned and saw me. For the briefest moment, I thought I saw softness in her eyes, a flicker of surprise, maybe even relief. But it vanished as quickly as it came. "You actually came," she said, voice light, cool. "I told you I would," I replied, forcing a smile. She glanced at Ethan and gave a small, polite nod. "He's getting so big." No hug, no warmth, just words. Then she was swept away in a swirl of white fabric, laughter, and well-wishers. Deborah, standing near the stage, didn't even look at me as we passed. She kept her eyes locked on Sabrina, her face shining with pride. My chest tightened, but I tried to ignore it. I led Ethan to our table, pulling out a chair for him. He climbed up, feet dangling high above the carpet. "Mom, why aren't we sitting closer to the front?" My throat worked around the words. "Because sometimes people don't know where to put us." He blinked at me, confusion mixing with the innocence in his eyes. "I don't care. We're still here." He grinned, and for a second, it felt like enough. I smoothed my dress and looked around. Everywhere, people toasted, laughter bubbled, and the music floated sweet and delicate through the room. I told myself I could survive a few hours, that I'd smile, clap, and slip away unnoticed. But as I caught sight of Sabrina stepping toward the microphone, my heart squeezed in my chest. Somewhere deep inside me, a voice whispered that nothing about this night would stay polite. The violinists lowered their bows as Sabrina stepped onto the small stage at the front of the ballroom, her white satin dress shimmering beneath the chandeliers. A hush rolled across the guests, like someone had pressed mute on the entire room. Sabrina held the microphone in delicate fingers, her diamond bracelet catching the light with every tiny movement. She glanced around, scanning the crowd, and let a coy smile curve her lips. "It means so much to me that you're all here tonight," she began, her voice soft, sweet as spun sugar. "To celebrate the happiest day of my life, surrounded by people who mean everything to me." Polite laughter rippled through the room. I sat at table 23, pressing my palms into my lap, hoping she'd leave it at that, hoping she'd stick to thanking vendors and talking about love. Instead, she tilted her head, hair cascading over one bare shoulder. "But before we keep dancing the night away, there's one very special person I'd like to thank." My stomach clenched so hard I thought I might be sick. "I want to talk about my sister." Eyes turned toward me. The guests shifted in their chairs, some leaning forward, eager. Sabrina's smile widened, but her eyes went sharp, like a blade. "Julia has always been an inspiration to me." I forced my lips into a frozen curve, praying she'd stop. "She taught me what resilience looks like, what it means to keep going, even when life doesn't go the way you planned." A few people chuckled softly, uncertain. Sabrina's voice turned syrupy sweet. "I mean, imagine raising a child completely alone, working 2 jobs, still finding time to show up tonight looking—" She waved her hand up and down in a vague gesture. "Decent. That's real commitment." A ripple of laughter burst through the tables. A few gasps. Someone at table 6 clinked their glass. Blood roared in my ears. Ethan tugged at my sleeve, eyes round as coins. "Mom, why's Aunt Sabrina talking like that?" My mouth went dry. I couldn't answer him. Sabrina kept going, unstoppable, voice rising just enough to carry. "Single motherhood is so brave, so noble. I don't know how you do it, Julia. Honestly, I'd rather be dead than that. Exhausted. All those shifts at coffee shops and hotel desks, smiling at strangers, hoping one of them might eventually stick around." People laughed louder. Clapping broke out at one of the front tables. Ethan stared at me, confusion twisting his features. Sabrina leaned closer to the microphone. "I mean, there's not enough Instagram filters in the world to cover up some mistakes, right?" That one hit like a slap across my face. A wave of laughter crashed over the room. Sharper now, the kind that slices skin. I could feel it, scraping over me, leaving invisible cuts. My vision blurred. Deborah, standing near the stage, laughed an icy, brittle sound. She bent toward the couple beside her and added, "Just loud enough to carry. Well, a used car can still look shiny if you polish it enough." I felt my spine snap straight, like someone had poured ice water down my back. More laughter, the sharp, vicious kind that vibrates in your bones. People glanced my way, some eyes wide with pity, others with gleeful curiosity, like they'd stumbled onto live reality TV. I tried to swallow, but my throat was stone. Ethan whispered again, voice trembling. "Why are they laughing? Mom, did you do something wrong?" The sound of his small, bewildered voice cracked something deep inside me. All I wanted was to scoop him up, bolt for the exit, and never look back. But my legs wouldn't move. My fingers curled into the satin of my dress. Clutching it so hard my knuckles went white. I scanned the room for someone, anyone who might meet my eyes, and tell me I wasn't completely alone. but every face seemed turned away. A man across the room stared into his champagne glass. A woman scrolled her phone, thumbs moving fast. Even Grandpa Norman, who used to call me his little lion when I was a kid, kept his eyes glued to his plate, shoulders hunched like he was trying to disappear. My chest heaved. I felt like I was drowning in laughter that wasn't really laughter at all, just knives, sharpened on old resentments and new cruelty. I opened my mouth, trying to form words, to defend myself, to say I was more than this single story Sabrina painted of me. But nothing came out. Instead, I sat frozen in my chair, staring at the stage, as my sister's perfect, poisonous smile glittered under the lights. A chair scraped back so loudly it cracked through the wall of laughter like thunder. For a split second, the entire ballroom froze. Glasses halted mid-air. Forks paused halfway to lips. Even the violinists lowered their bows as silence swept the room like a sudden gust of wind. Derek Collins, Sabrina's fiancé, stood up slowly from the head table. His dark suit looked crisp under the lights. His broad shoulders squared, jaw tight enough to crack. He didn't glance at Sabrina. He didn't look at the laughing crowd. His eyes locked directly onto mine. My breath caught in my throat. Sabrina blinked at him, her smile faltering for the first time all night. "Derek, what are you—" But he raised a hand, cutting her off. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, steady, but edged with something sharp as glass. "I can't pretend I'm okay with what just happened." A murmur swept through the guests like rustling paper. Heads twisted back and forth between Derek and Sabrina. Derek stepped around his chair, moving away from the head table, the microphone glinting in Sabrina's hand as she stared at him. Speechless, he kept talking, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "I've spent months listening to people talk about family, loyalty, tradition, about how this day was supposed to be perfect." He took another step closer to where I sat, Ethan clutching my arm so hard it almost hurt. "But what I just saw, that wasn't family. That was cruelty, dressed up in white satin and champagne glasses." Gasps whispered through the crowd. A woman near the front clasped her pearls against her throat. Sabrina shook her head, her voice trembling. "Derek, it was just a joke." Was it he shot back, eyes flashing, because it didn't sound funny? "Not when your sister who showed up here tonight, despite every reason not to, got humiliated in front of hundreds of people." Sabrina's mouth opened, closed. Derek turned away from her, gaze sweeping the room. Julia didn't ask to be mocked. She didn't ask to become entertainment. She's the mother of a little boy who deserves to look at his mom and know she's respected, not the punchline of a cruel speech. Tears burned my eyes. I swallowed hard, fighting to keep my chin up. Derek went on, his voice gentler, but somehow even more powerful. "I know what it's like to grow up watching people laugh at someone you love. My mom was a single mother too. She worked 2 jobs. She did everything she could so I wouldn't feel less than anyone else. And you know what? She was the strongest person I ever knew." A hush fell so thick you could hear the soft whir of the ballroom's AC. He turned back to Sabrina, voice dropping lower. "So if you think I'm going to stand here and marry into a family that thinks shame is tradition, you're wrong." Sabrina's face drained of color. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Derek took a deep breath, eyes still fixed on her. "I'd rather leave here alone than spend the rest of my life pretending that cruelty is love." A collective gasp surged through the crowd, sharp as a breaking wave. Derek reached into his pocket, pulled out the small velvet ring box, and set it gently on the head table. Then he turned, walked past Sabrina without a glance, and headed straight toward the ballroom doors. My entire body felt like it might collapse under the weight of what just happened. People stared in stunned silence. No one moved. No one breathed. Even the chandeliers seemed to hold their light a little dimmer. Ethan looked up at me. eyes shining with something close to awe. "Mom, is Derek a superhero?" I let out a shaky laugh that tasted like tears. "Yeah, baby. Maybe he is." Somewhere near the head table. Sabrina swayed on her feet. Deborah reached for her arm, but Sabrina pulled away, staring at the doors Derek had disappeared through. Her perfect wedding crashing down around her like glass shattering on marble. And for the first time all night, I didn't feel small. The ballroom emptied in ripples, guests drifting toward the exits in stunned silence, their heels clicking sharp against marble floors. No music played, no bouquet toss, no cheers or clinking glasses. Just the soft hush of disbelief, as if everyone was trying to piece together how a fairy tale wedding collapsed in front of them. Ethan and I slipped out into the cool San Francisco night. The wind smelled like salt and city lights. He held my hand tightly, peering up at the towering hotel behind us, the gold letters of the Fairmont gleaming under street lamps. "Mom, are we going home?" "Yeah, baby, we're going home." We didn't speak much during the ride. The cab hummed through the city, neon signs blurring past the windows. Ethan leaned his head on my shoulder, eyelids fluttering heavy with exhaustion. By the time I tucked him into bed, his little suit jacket hung from the back of a chair, wrinkled, chocolate mousse stains on the lapel. He mumbled something about superheroes and fell asleep, breathing soft and even. I collapsed on the couch, kicked off my heels, and stared at the ceiling like it might have answers. Somewhere after midnight, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. When I finally unlocked it, I found dozens of missed calls and text messages, most from numbers I didn't even recognize. A friend sent a single link. "You need to see this." My fingers hovered over the screen, hesitant. But curiosity won. A TikTok video began playing, vertical and shaky. Derek's voice boomed through my tiny speakers. "I'd rather leave here alone than spend the rest of my life pretending that cruelty is love." The clip cut to me sitting frozen at my table. Ethan beside me, eyes wide. Over the video, bold white text flashed. "Groom cancels wedding to defend single mom. Hero or drama king?" I stared as the view count ticked higher. 40,000, 60,000, 90. My heart twisted. The comments scrolled so fast I could barely keep up. "This man is a legend. Protect single moms at all costs. Sabrina should be ashamed. OMG, I'm crying. Julia, if you see this, you deserve better." Another video popped up on my feed. Someone had filmed Sabrina's entire speech. The laughter, my face crumbling. It felt like watching myself drown on repeat. Messages poured in, strangers telling me they'd been through the same thing. Other single moms sharing their stories of being judged, mocked, written off as failures. Some offered to send money. Others just sent love. One comment kept replaying in my mind. This isn't just about one woman. It's about how people think they're allowed to humiliate single moms and call it a joke. My chest tightened. Part of me wanted to delete every app, bury my phone under a pillow, and disappear. But another part, the part that had always stayed silent, felt something uncoil inside me. A few days later, Sabrina tried to spin the story. She posted a carefully worded statement on her Instagram stories. Pale pink background, fancy cursive font. Sometimes jokes get taken the wrong way. I wish everyone could just move forward in love and positivity. But no one was buying it. Comment sections filled with angry faces and clapping emojis aimed at Derek's stand. Brands quietly stopped tagging her. One influencer called her out directly, saying, "If your joke humiliates someone, it's not comedy, it's cruelty." A talk show producer messaged me, offering a spot to tell my side. I stared at the offer for a long time, but I turned it down. I didn't want a spotlight. I didn't want to become the single mom who got roasted at a wedding. I just wanted my life back, Still, it was strange to see strangers defending me when my own family never had. Ethan tiptoed into the living room the next morning, rubbing his eyes. "Mom, are you famous now?" I laughed, scooping him up into my lap. "No, baby, I'm just me," he frowned. "I think you're kind of famous, and you're way cooler than Aunt Sabrina." I kissed his hair, breathing in the smell of soap and sleep. In that quiet moment, it didn't matter how many views the videos had. All that mattered was the little boy in my arms, and the fact that, for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. The weeks after the wedding felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into a new world I didn't quite know how to enter. Everywhere I went, people recognized me. At the coffee shop, a woman leaned across the counter, eyes shining, and whispered, "I saw the video. You're amazing." An older man slipped me a note with his coffee order that read, "Single moms are warriors. You're proof." It was surreal, but between the viral clips and the headlines, my life still felt stubbornly ordinary. I woke up at dawn to make Ethan pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. I scraped quarters together for rent. I stitched the hem of my uniform when it started to fray. Only something inside me had shifted. I walked taller, spoke clearer, looked people in the eye instead of down at my shoes. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't ashamed of my story. Ethan, meanwhile, became obsessed with Derek. He ran around the apartment, wielding his toy Captain America shield, yelling, "Not today," bullies at invisible enemies. One night, as we brushed our teeth, he paused, blue bubblegum foam dripping down his chin. "Mom, do you think Derek would come over for dinner?" I laughed so hard I almost dropped my toothbrush. "I think Derek has a lot going on right now, honey." Ethan's eyes sparkled. "Maybe we can invite him when he's done being sad." I ruffled his hair. Maybe. A few days later, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Stanford's Continuing Studies program. I stared at it for a long time, the words blurring into gray lines. "We'd be happy to welcome you back if you'd like to resume your degree." My heart thudded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I'd buried that dream so deep I thought it was gone forever. But now, I started imagining a future where I wasn't just surviving. A future where Ethan could see his mom doing more than working endless shifts, exhausted and invisible. When I told Ethan I might go back to school, his entire face lit up. "Will you be a student? Like me?" I nodded, grinning. "Yep, we'll both have homework." He beamed. "Then one day, you can work at Google." I laughed, shaking my head. "Let's start with college first." At night, when the city glowed outside our windows, I found myself thinking about Derek. I'd heard he moved out of the apartment he shared with Sabrina. I didn't know where he was staying, or how he was coping. Part of me wanted to reach out, to thank him, to tell him he changed more than just one night. He changed the way I saw myself. But another part of me felt like he needed space. So instead, I carried the memory of his words like armor. Sometimes, I'd catch my reflection in a shop window, same tired eyes, same lines around my mouth, but I saw strength there now. One evening, as Ethan and I stood watching the sunset over the Golden Gate Bridge, he leaned his head against my side. "Mom, are you still sad about the wedding?" I paused, searching the horizon, the sky streaked pink and gold. "No, baby, I'm not sad anymore." "Why not?" I smiled, pressing a kiss to his temple. "Because I finally know who I am. And no one gets to define me but me." Ethan considered that, then gave a firm nod. "Good, because I like you exactly how you are." And in that moment, with the ocean breeze cool against my skin, my son beside me, and the city lights beginning to glow, I realized I'd left the ballroom with something more precious than anyone there could have offered. I'd left with my dignity, my freedom, and the quiet certainty that my story wasn't over. It was just beginning. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that people will try to tell your story for you. They'll slap labels on you: single mom, failure, cautionary tale like cheap price tags. But the truth is, they don't get to decide who you are. I used to think being alone meant being unwanted, that if I didn't fit into my family's perfect picture, there was something wrong with me. But now I know, being alone doesn't mean you're unlovable, and kindness doesn't make you weak. Sometimes the strongest thing you'll ever do is refuse to stay silent when cruelty walks into the room wearing a smile. I look at Ethan now, how he's growing taller, asking bigger questions, carrying his little action figures like they're soldiers ready to defend the world. He's already learning that it's braver to stand up for someone than to laugh along with a crowd. That night at Sabrina's wedding taught me that dignity isn't given, it's claimed. It's choosing to walk away from the people who tear you down, even when your legs are shaking. It's choosing to believe that your worth isn't defined by whether someone else claps for you. And it's knowing that sometimes the family who stands up for you isn't blood. It's the people who decide you're worth fighting for. I've kept my life small for so long, afraid that speaking up would bring more pain. But I'm not hiding anymore. My story might not be wrapped in glitter or go viral every day, but it's mine, and that's enough. If you're listening to this, and you've ever been laughed at or pushed into the shadows, or made to feel like your life is just a list of mistakes, I want you to hear me. Your voice matters. Your story matters. You deserve to take up space in the world, and you are not alone. Life won't always hand you fairy tale endings tied with satin bows. Sometimes the best ending is simply walking away with your head held high, knowing who you are. And sometimes that's the ending no one expects, but exactly the one you deserve. So be kind, be brave, and don't ever let anyone dim the light you carry. Because somewhere out there, someone's waiting to see it shine.